Wednesday is an interesting church calendar event. It's like the Eeyore of the church year. You have things like Christmas and Easter. Ash Wednesday is the one event that you do not have to worry about our culture co-opting and commercializing. Because everything about Ash Wednesday is the complete antithesis. It's the opposite of what we are fed in our culture. And yet, it's even uncomfortable. Even as we were prepping tonight, because we kind of sit here. And when we sit here, it can get uncomfortable to sit here. And we're going to sit here for a few minutes this evening because we're going to talk about death. Ash Wednesday strikes at the illusion that we actually have control. But it is the one day of the year where we get to really be honest. About our lot. We don't like to be honest about it. And yet, to think about this can make us feel despairing. It can send us into what we may believe is this chasm of terrible meaninglessness. I think the Old Testament book that sits in this day is Ecclesiastes. So you may think that this is depressing. I would like to submit that what's really depressing is to actually pretend that this isn't reality. It's to pretend otherwise. It's to pretend that, you know what, I'm not free yet, and I haven't figured this thing out, but I just haven't pulled the right buttons. I haven't pulled it off yet. It's even why we sometimes even engage church is for the exact opposite reason, because maybe someone will tell us how we can pull this thing off, and we haven't pulled it off yet. I want to ask a question tonight. Do you and do me and do I revolve and live in this world where we are just like eternally frustrated because we're just not getting it done? No matter how hard we try, I'm not getting it done as a parent. I'm not getting it done as a spouse. I'm not getting it done as a kid. Can never get my grades in order. We're not getting it done as a church. No matter how hard I try to be the parent I want to be, no matter how hard we try to be the kid we want to be, no how hard we try to be the partner we want to be, we come home at night and we have these moments and just think, I am not getting this done. The reason we live there, the reason we have those feelings. You may even come to a service like this, or you may come to a service on a Sunday morning You actually, maybe the intention of the message on a Sunday morning is to remind you that you're not getting it done. And then to give you 5 ways that you can get it done, which leaves you despairing and even more frustrated. You see, the question and the feelings that we have that we're not getting it done is because we've embraced a Christianity that is just law and not promise. And when you have a Christianity that lives in the law, you will never get it done. And yet we dangle the law out there like a carrot, thinking that if we just tell people what to do, that carrot, that the law itself can actually enable you to get it done. But we live in this world where we never seem to be getting it done. And we just try harder, or we just want to try a new different path. We want to try a new church. We want to read a new book. Ash Wednesday and even Lent can hang around our necks like an albatross. And Lent can just become this place where I get up here, or you in your minds go to this place where I ask you to get control of something that you've tried 1,000 times to get control of. Maybe this year it will work. You know, Lent in the calendar year falls just as far enough from all of those New Year's resolutions that we didn't keep. So we get a re-up. That's not what I believe Lent is all about. The text that was read this morning was a follow-up, if you were here on Sunday, from the Transfiguration. And there is a purpose in the Transfiguration being the last epiphany, because it's really the greatest epiphany, minus the second coming of Christ that you have in the life of Christ. There's no greater epiphany, the revealing of Christ's glory, than the Transfiguration. But what was read was what was going on at the bottom of the mountain while Jesus and Peter and James and John were up on the mountain in glory. The passage right before the Transfiguration is a familiar passage, especially for the not getting enough done a reality in which we live. And I find it interesting how this passage winds its way. Jesus has said he's going to suffer, but then he says that famous saying, "What shall it profit a man if he should gain the whole world and lose his soul?" If you want to save your life, if you want to get it done, you're going to have to lose it to find it. And then Jesus says something really interesting when he says, and by the way, so he's kind of presented himself as the only one that can be trusted, the only one that it's trust in him alone, that you're going to have to follow me, that I am the source of life. And he says after, you know what, if you want to save your life, you're going to have to lose it. But he throws in another verse that I actually think there was a twinge of, I don't know if it was humor in it, but there's this reality that he even says in the very next verse, right before the Transfiguration, and by the way, if you don't believe what I said, if you're actually embarrassed about Jesus plus nothing is everything, if you're actually embarrassed about that, if you're ashamed of that message of finding life, then I'm going to be ashamed of you on the day. And you think, well, how does a grace guy deal with a passage like that? If you're embarrassed of me, I'm going to be embarrassed of you. You're ashamed of me and my message, then I'm going to be ashamed of you. What kind of God is that? Well, lo and behold, we end up on the Mount of Transfiguration, and who's not getting it done? It's embarrassing, isn't it? The disciples are in the midst of a meeting between Jesus, Elijah, and Moses, and they're sleeping. How embarrassing. Then Peter opens up his mouth, and Luke says, Peter, you're just babbling. You're an embarrassment to the situation. Yet in the midst of that, Christ keeps coming in his glory. But then, in the passage we read, we go down, so 9 of the disciples didn't go up the mountain. 9 of the disciples stayed at the bottom of the mountain. And there's this man, and I'm not going to exegete this text, but he's got a one and only son. And his one and only son is controlled by things that harm him. Things that we're trying to get a hold of that control us, that are harming us. And it says, here's embarrassing incident number 2, Jesus comes down the mountain, and the father's frustrated because the disciples have been out healing. They'd just been sent out and they were healing people, but they couldn't heal this individual. Try as they might. Embarrassing. Jesus even we don't know why they couldn't, but Jesus calls them faithless. A rejection. Whatever was going on, there was a rejection of who Jesus was in the midst of that healing. They are faithless and they've corrupted his message that he had just given them. There at the bottom of the mountain, we see the faith of this man who finally comes in complete helplessness. He's tried. And he's tried. And he even tried the 9 disciples who were at the bottom of the mountain. And he comes to Jesus helpless, with no other recourse. He was experiencing the ache of the absence of Jesus. His son controlled by something, in this case the demons, that were harming him. And the only way for control to be arrested from the demons, the only way for control to keep from harming this individual was for this individual and for this father to come to Jesus plus nothing. For his everything. You see, in those moments, I think what Jesus is saying, that we are trying to save our lives, where we've held up some standard that we've got to meet that standard. And the law, by the way, is God's holy and perfect standard, and we all fall short of it. But in those moments that we look to that, and we keep trying to save our lives, we keep losing our life because we're trying to save our lives. Because we're the ones trying to control it. Because we're the ones that think we can get it done. And Jesus is saying in the midst of that reality, in the midst of trying to get it done, you will lose every single time. When you're trying to save your life, you will lose it. But when you quit trying to save it, you will stop losing it. You know what Jesus is saying to his disciples at the bottom of the mountain, to those who fell asleep, is that he comes to us and he says, you know, all those attempts to gain control, all of those attempts to think that you're going to get it done, all of those things that you think you're doing, that you can shine up in my face and demand something from me because you think that you're getting it done, they're actually a complete embarrassment. Because I don't want that. I want you and your helplessness to trust me. All of our attempts are an embarrassment. St. Paul actually uses this language in Galatians where he talks about living under the law or living under grace. And the people who want to live under the law, and he finally, exasperated, says in Galatians, okay, you want to live on the law, under the law? Go for it. Just go for it. And see how that works out for you. Because Paul in Galatians is saying it will be a complete embarrassment. But Jesus is saying, in Ash Wednesday and as Lent comes to us, that Lent, and I say this every year, and I will say it every year from here on out, that Lent is not about you and I getting more control. Lent is about us giving up control. Because our problem is we're trying to control everything to save our lives. And by the time you get to the bottom of the mountain, there is only one Savior. There's only one. And his name is Jesus. In Mark's account of this very event, we get that famous saying, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. If you want a thesis statement for Christianity, that's it. We believe. Now come in and save me from my unbelief. Because I can't even believe right. I can't get belief done without his strength. The fact that there is nothing left for you and I to do is where the death of self comes in. The fact that there is nothing left for you and I to do, and I know we cringe that because we do not want to die. It's the death of control. So Ash Wednesday, it is, I say this every year, it is actually my favorite service. Because Ash Wednesday actually begins Lent because it stands as a guard over Lent. And what we would do with Lent without the reality that we start first with our own mortality and our own death. I love Ash Wednesday because it also stands guard over Nature Coast Church. Ash Wednesday and its message stands guard over the message that it really is Jesus plus nothing equals everything. Ecclesiastes, the writer of Ecclesiastes even reminds us, you know what the frustrating thing of Ecclesiastes, what does he say? He says, you know what? You can live as you want and you die. You can live great and die. It seems kind of morbid. But that's all under the sun. Ash Wednesday reminds us that there's going to be someone that came from above the sun. And Ash Wednesday stands guard over the church. It stands guard over our mission statements, our core values. It stands guard over our pettiness. It stands guard over the nonsense ladder. I mean, the truth is, Ash Wednesday reminds us, even as we are all in different parts of our walk here, but we're all dying. We are all going to die. If you, in your mind, if you think Christianity is some kind of ladder experience, it doesn't matter if you're on the top rung of the ladder, you're going to die because you're a sinner. And sometimes I wonder, Ash Wednesday grounds us in John where it says, he who says he has no sin is a liar, and the truth is not in them. It grounds us in that because somewhere along the line, we've actually turned Christianity. We will preach that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, but the goal of Christianity is for God to create a people that if he could have just got us here to begin with, he'd have never had to die for us. Is it true? After 50 years of being a Christian, now you become a person that Christ wouldn't have to die for anymore. Ash Wednesday grounds us and stands guard over that kind of nonsense. It grounds us into Jesus because it's in the dust where we find Jesus. We're so busy sometimes trying to fix everything and run for our brokenness when Jesus is in the brokenness and he is in those places because we are dust. And even those who God has redeemed will return to dust. So Ash Wednesday invites us to quit pretending, quit proving, and quit protecting ourselves. Quit pretending we're someone we're not with the masks we wear. Quit trying to prove who we are and our identity. Quit trying to protect reputations that Ash Wednesdays reminds us we don't have, and to trust the one who has come. Ash Wednesday reminds us that there is no ladder to climb because God climbed all the way down to a manger and became Emmanuel and God with us. And we, all of us together, are walking hand in hand with him because he came all the way down. Emmanuel, God with us. He came into the dust. And he came into the dirt. And he came into our lives. Ash Wednesday stands guard over Lent because we turn Lent into a ladder when Lent leads us to the cross and then to an empty tomb. We are going to do ashes at this point in time. Before we do, we're going to watch a video. And maybe I'll just give a bit of instruction after the video. Before we watch the video, I always, if you're new here, I'm bolder at times. And there's a woman going to be talking in this video, and she's going to use a colorful word. Please do not, in that earthiness, lose. It's only once, so once she says it and it's in the beginning, you don't have to fear that it's going to keep coming up. But don't lose sight of the gift of Ash Wednesday. This is a woman who just walks out into the street and puts crosses on people on Ash Wednesday.
I gotta say, with this whole experience of offering ashes on the street in Ash Wednesday, which I've been doing now for 4 years, the thing that always wrecks me is giving ashes to babies. Like some mom will hold up her kid who's a couple of weeks or a couple of months old, and I have to take this baby and put a cross on its head and tell it that it's going to die. It just wrecks me, It's funny, last year I realized that cross of ash was so much like the cross you get on your head when you're baptized. And it really made me remember my own baptism, because I was just scared shitless. I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not my idea. I felt like I had to do it, and I was being pulled toward it. But I was also like, whoa, that water is dark. I don't want to go down in there. I don't want to die. And it wasn't, there's something beyond the death that we proclaim on Ash Wednesday. And there's something beyond the death that we enact when we do baptism. And I can't tell you where that lives, but I can tell you that I feel it.
You said the fact that we're going to die is good news. Like, really? Awesome.
Well, there aren't a lot of places in the world where you go and you hear the truth, right? And I think one of the reasons why people literally run after me on the street in Ash Wednesday saying, wait, can I have some of those? Wait a minute, my mom's in the car, she wants some, wait a minute, hold on, I'm going to give you my baby so you can give them ashes. It's partly because when do you get to touch a stranger and tell them the truth, or hear the truth, or speak the truth? It's just so rare in our culture. What we hear is, if you buy this, you won't die.
Are you saying we won't get out of here alive?
We keep trying to, sell this idea that we're immortal and that we're in charge of our lives and that we can manage all these outcomes, but we can't. People know that. And it's sort of a relief, finally. My friend who's a chaplain at the hospital, works in pediatrics, works with a lot of dying kids. And he said, man, on Ash Wednesday, like, even the doctors are relieved that they're not in charge. Like, they're just another person with some dirt on their head, right? They're not immortal, they're not gods. So I think we fight all the time against this fantasy that we want to be gods and in charge. And then there's this incredible, sweet, deep relief when you realize I'm not in charge. God's in charge. That's good news.
You see, even a day like Ash Wednesday is good news. It's good news. Because it's where the promises of God meet us. And it meets you. And it meets me. It is good news that He's in charge. Because I have spent 50 years of my life wrecking my life thinking I am in charge. Hear the good news. We are going to do ashes. Every year I do explain this because there actually is a passage in Matthew that talks about not doing stuff like this. What do you mean we're not doing stuff like this? And let me just say this. One, you don't have to come. And two, if you read the Matthew passage, it would talk about things that religious people were doing that were called marks of piety, that were meant to turn your people to look at you so that you people would see how spiritual you are. If you get these ashes, they're not a mark of how spiritual you are. They're a mark that you're dying and that you have no hope but Jesus. This is not commanded in Scripture, so if you don't want to come up, you don't have to. One is no more on a rung of a ladder than someone else who chooses to come or doesn't come. You are free because God's in charge of that.